The sun on the sky was like a torn wound, and the bloody light shone on the wasteland, reflecting the broken steel outer wall of the iron castle like a slaughter that had just been stolen from the war. I stood on the watchtower on the top of the fortress, holding a piece of grinding iron in my hand. It was removed from my first self-made machinery, which was considered a thought. The wind shaves over, carrying sand and the familiar radiant fishy smell, which makes people's eyes feel sore. I squinted my eyes, and several black spots were moving on the far side of the wasteland, and it was probably those strange monsters were traveling again. If the weather is not good, maybe there will be the Blood Blade King who helps the plunder. Lin Hao, are you in a daze again? Yi Shuang's voice came from behind, with a little impatient feeling, but she couldn't hide the scent of concern. I turned over and saw her wearing a broken battle suit, carrying a modified electromagnetic step gun on her shoulder, and a dusty face that had just been patrolling back. Her eyebrows were slightly snaked, and her eyes were as sharp as if she could directly pierce people. There were no one who could survive to this day in the end of the world. I'm not stupid, watch the enemy. I grinned, stuffed the iron piece back into my pocket, and patted the dust on my hand. I just saw a few black shadows. They should be strange monsters, and there is no big threat. However, our energy core has dropped by 2 percentage points. If we don't get some new resources back, the defense system of the fortress will have to stop long ago. Yi Shuang heard it and her face darkened. She walked to me, leaning against the iron column, and her eyes also turned to the wasteland far away. Didn't Zhang Jing say there is a temporary plan for energy? Why, or hasn't it been done? I snatched my head and smiled bitterly. That guy Zhang Jing, my brain is very good, but my temper is as smelly as the radiant smell on the soil. The temporary plan, he said, is to draw all the last reserve energy into the defense system, so that I can barely take half a month. But this is not a cure. What should I do in half a month? Wait for the monster to come in and take us for dinner? Yi Shuang didn't answer, but just held the gun in her hand tightly, and was silent for a few seconds before she said in a low voice, "Then I have to find a way to go out and find resources." Many people in the fortress have started to feel good. They said that the food is not enough. Yesterday, someone started to beat them because of a piece of pressure. If they don't give them any hope, they will have to be in trouble. I clicked my head, and my heart looked like a bright mirror. It is true that the Iron Castle is the last shelter of human beings, but the hearts of the people inside have long been shattered by the end of the world. When I first designed this fortress, I wanted to give the survivors a safe home, but now it seems that this place is more like a huge iron candle, keeping everyone's fear and hope together. Resources are getting less and less, and external threats are getting closer and closer. I, the so-called fortress builder, are so stressful that I can't breathe. Sister Shuang, you said, if you can find the source of the radiating storm, can you change everything? I suddenly said this, and even I felt a little strange. The radiating storm was the cause of the catastrophe in 2077. 90% of humans became monsters, and the rest of us were stalking on the wasteland to survive. Over the years, everyone has said that it was a disaster and an indescribable fate, but I always think that things are not that simple. Yi Shuang turned her head and looked at me, her eyes flashing with a strange look, but soon returned to her cold appearance. Reinforcement? Lin Hao, you're doing daydreaming again. If that thing could be found, someone would have tried it long ago. How could we get it? Besides, even if there's really a reinforcement, who knows what it is? Maybe it's a bigger death trap. Maybe. I heard my voice and didn't say anything more, but there was a voice in my heart that kept calling. If I could really find the source, I might be able to reverse this dead fate. I know this idea sounds like a joke, but I can't help but think about it. Because whenever I close my eyes, I can see my father and sister's faces. They disappeared in the first wave of monsters in the apocalypse, and I didn't even see them at the last glance. That guilt was engraved in my heart like a knife, forcing me to do something. At this time, a rapid pace came from the watchtower, followed by the shout of Zhang Jing, Lin Hao. After a trip, there is another problem with the energy core data. You have to come and see. His voice was filled with impatience, and he probably had to quarrel with whom he was again. I held Yi Shuang helplessly. Let's go, our big scientist is urging death again. She snorted lightly, and without saying much, she turned around and got down the watchtower with me. The situation inside the fortress looked worse than outside. The lights in the corridor flickered and the air was filled with a mixed smell of iron and sweat. When I passed by the living area, I could hear the people inside whispering curses. Some complained that the food was not enough, some said that the prevention system was too bad to collapse, and several young people gathered together, their eyes full of confusion about the future. My heart slid and my pace was accelerated. When he arrived at the control room, Zhang Jing was standing in front of a pile of broken display screens, knocking on the keyboard with annoyance. When he saw me coming in, he didn't raise his head and open his mouth directly. The decay of the energy core is faster than expected. According to this trend, don't say that it will take less than half a month or 10 days. No matter how powerful your defense system is, you must have energy support, right? Okay, don't waste your time and just say what to do. I walked to him, looked down at the curve of the data on the screen, and my heart was waving. The red warning line is almost at the limit, which means that the shield of the fortress may be closed at any time. By then, monsters and snatchers from outside can easily come in and turn this into a slaughterhouse. Zhang Jing sneered and pushed the lens on his nose that had already damaged his legs. What should I do? If you want to extract all the energy reserves, you have to take people out to find new energy crystals. The radiation areas on the wasteland are dangerous, but some places still have the energy reserves of the old civilization. If you dare to gamble, you may be able to regain your life and save this broken place. Go out to find it? Yi Shuang interrupted, his temperament full of doubts. Zhang Jing, your brain is not damaged, right? In the radiator area on the wasteland, 9 out of 10 will die, and the remaining 1 will also become a monster. Are you asking Lin Hao to die? Zhang Jing turned his head and glared at her, and replied without any politeness, if you don't go find me, you will die. At least you have hope. What else can you do, as the chief defense officer, besides beating people with guns? Do you really think that you can defend the fortress with your broken perception ability? Seeing that the two of them were about to quarrel again, I slammed and said, okay, don't quarrel. Zhang Jing, give us a specific location, where there is a cable of energy crystal on the wasteland. I will take someone to try it. Yi Shuang, don't worry. We are not having a way out, we just need to take a try. Zhang Jing hummed, turned around and took out a broken map from the table, full of various marks. He pointed to the location of a red circle on the map and said, this is about 3 days away from us, from the northeast of the soil. It used to be a practical experiment base for an old civilization. The radiation concentration was very high, but there were unactivated energy crystals. If you really dare to go, remember to bring radiation-proof equipment, otherwise you would have to lose your life. I followed the map and looked down at the red circle, and my heart was filled with scent. The radiation area on the wasteland is indeed a place of life and death, but the situation of the fortress cannot let me hesitate. The energy core is consumed, and monsters and plunders are coming in, and none of us can survive. Okay, that's it. I raised my head and looked at Yi Shuang and Zhang Jing. My language was a little surprised. I'll bring a team of people and we'll be out tomorrow morning. Yi Shuang, you and I have to ensure the safety of the team. Zhang Jing, here I will hand it over to you, the defense system of the fortress cannot go wrong. Yi Shuang stared at her eyebrows, but she didn't make it a big deal, but in the end she still pointed, okay, I'll go with you. But Lin Hao, remember, our lives are not for chasing. If the situation is not right, please withdraw, don't force yourself. Zhang Jingyan was a face that was so rude, with you, I just care about the data anyway, the fortress will not collapse, and my responsibility will not lie with me. I ignored his sarcasm, folded the map and stuffed it into my pocket, and turned it to arrange for the team's selection. As soon as he walked out of the control room, a low warning suddenly came from a distance, followed by a guard on the watchtower, monster. There is a group of monsters approaching the east, and there are quite a few. My heart was tightened, and I stood up and rushed towards the watchtower, and Yi Shuang followed behind me. When I arrived at the top of the tower, with the last light of the sun, I saw that on the wasteland on the east side, there were dozens of strange monsters approaching the fortress. Their bodies were twisted like plastic that was radiated and burned. Their eyes were filled with red light, and their mouths were roaring, dragging their deformed limbs, like a dream of crawling out of the ground. "Prepare defense!" Yi Shuang shouted softly, and had already set up an electromagnetic step gun to aim at the monster in front. I didn't bother to the console and started the outer network of the fortress. The blue arc jumped on the steel wall, making a harsh sizzling sound, but the energy was insufficient, and the power of the internet was significantly weaker. "Lin Hao, the internet won't be long, and you must respond manually." There was an anxious voice in Yi Shuang's voice. I clicked the head, grabbed the communication device, and ordered the battle team in the fortress. "All the fighters will gather in the east wall immediately and prepare to welcome the monster group." The next hour, the fortress east wall became a battleground. The sound of the shooting of the electromagnetic step gun, the roar of the monster, and the sound of the steel being hit mixed together, making people's ears numb. Yi Shuang and I stood at the forefront, cooperated with other warriors, and reluctantly resisted the first wave of attacks. But the number of monsters is actually too large, and the internet has been broken several times. If Yi Shuang hadn't had the advance warning of his perception ability, someone would have been injured long ago. Finally, after the last monster was knocked down, the battleground calmed down. I leaned against the wall, panting, my body covered in sweat and the stinking blood of monsters. Yes, Huang was not much better, her face was pale, but her eyes were still so sure. "This wave of monsters is more powerful than before. It is probably the radiation concentration has increased again," she said in a low voice, with fatigue in her voice. "Lin Hao, we can't drag it anymore. The energy crystal must be found as soon as possible, otherwise the next time the monster comes, the fortress will really not be able to hold on." I slapped the blood on my face, looked at the dark wasteland far away, and made up my mind. Tomorrow, no matter how dangerous it is, I have to take my team out. The fortress is the last hope of human beings, and I can't let it fall like this. The night was getting thicker and the lights in the fortress became dimmer. I returned to my little room and found an old photo from the drawer, which was filled with the smiles of my father and sister. I gently touched the photo and muttered, "Don't worry, I won't let you die in vain. I'll find a way to change everything." At this time, there was a sound of knocking on the door outside, and Yi Shuang's voice sounded, "Lin Hao, the team has been selected and will be released tomorrow dawn. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath, put the photo back into the slug, stood up and opened the door, and pointed a little at her. "It's ready. Sister Shuang, let's fight for this last line of hope together." The sky was just bright, and the dust was covered with a layer of gray smoke. There was still the familiar radiant smell in the air, which made people's nose sore. I stood at the east gate of the Iron Wall Castle, wearing a broken anti-radio equipment, and a modified mechanical crossbow behind me, holding the broken map taken from Zhang Jing in my hand. Yi Shuang stood beside her, her expression was as cold as ever, and her electromagnetic step gun was slanted on her shoulders. Her eyes swept past the 5-member team behind us, as if she was confirming that everyone had no problem. I heard it all. "This mission is simple and not simple." I cleared my throat, my voice was low, and I tried to make myself sound like a team leader. "We are going to the old experiment base northeast of Wutu to find energy crystals. There will be strange monsters on the road, and maybe the Bloodblade King, the Helper. Remember, returning alive is more important than anything else. If the situation is not right, please withdraw. Don't force yourself. Do you understand?" Several people in the team clicked the head, and there were 2 young warriors with a little tight look in their eyes, but they still gritted their teeth and didn't say a word. Another person named Lao Zhao was a veteran in his 40s with scars on his face. He only grinned when he heard me and patted the broken machete on his waist. "Lin Tai, don't worry, we are so lucky." Yi Shuang glanced at me and didn't say anything, but the look was clearly saying, "Don't take someone in there." I smiled at her and turned to the warrior guarding the door and snatched the hand. "Open the door, let's go." The iron door emitted a harsh friction sound, rising slowly, and outside the door was an endless wasteland, full of scars, like a land that was bitten by some giant beast. The moment our group of 7 left the fortress, a string was tightened in our hearts. No matter how broken the fort is, it is also a place that can cover up the wind and rain. After leaving this door, who doesn't know whether it will turn into a monster's Chinese plate in the next second? The road on the first day was still smooth. Although the radiant fog on the waste soil was heavy, I didn't encounter any large group of monsters. I occasionally had a few different creatures that looked like humans but not humans, and crawled in the sand with deformed limbs. Yi Shuang's perception ability came to a great advantage. Every time the monster approached, she could remind us 10 seconds in advance that several times she would have shot her head and directly solved the trouble. Sister Shuang, this ability is so great. I walked beside her, exclaimed in a low voice, holding a mechanical crossbow in my hand, and prepared for the sudden situation at any time. If it weren't for you, we would have been covered by monsters long ago. Yi Shuang hummed and replied without any expression, "Don't waste your time, save some energy and energy. The radiation concentration ahead is getting higher and higher, and my perception will be affected. Don't expect me to be your rat-pat all the time." I listened to my shoulders and said nothing more, and looked down at the mark on the map. According to the thread Zhangjingji, the experiment base will take 2 days to go. On the way, you will pass through a dead valley with extremely high radiation concentration. I heard that the place was the core area where the radiation storm exploded that year. Don't talk about it, even the monsters don't want to get close. In the evening, the sun sinks, the temperature on the wasteland drops, and the cold wind makes people's face hurt. We found an old scrap gas station and fell on foot at a moment. Several people rushed to watch, and others grabbed a tight time to rest. I leaned against a half-collapsed wall and gnawed a hard and tight-clad bun. My brain was full of stuff. Although Zhang Jing's guy has a bad mouth, he really has no skills. I'm still relieved to leave him to stay at home. But the guys who are doing things inside, and monsters that may come from outside at any time, always make me feel uneasy. What are you thinking? Yi Shuang's voice suddenly sounded. She sat opposite me, holding a piece of rag in her hand and rubbing her step gun, her eyes still so sharp. I want to give in. I took a bite and replied vaguely, if I can't find the energy crystal this time, I can't explain it even if I go back. There are those people who, without saying anything, must be hoping that I can go back with some hope. Yi Shuang stopped the action in her hand, was silent for a few seconds before she said in a low voice, "Lin Hao, don't force yourself too tightly. The fortress belongs to everyone, not your personal responsibility. If you really can't find the crystal, we will definitely lose our lives if we think of other ways." I smiled, but didn't answer, and I knew very clearly in my heart. The fortress belongs to everyone, but when I first designed this place, I made a vow to keep the last hope of human beings. My father and sister's faces were floating in my brain again, and the guilt was swaying me like a knife, making me unable to retreat. When I was flying at night, the wasteland was so quiet that it was scary, with only the sound and the occasional growl from the distance. I held the mechanical crossbow, staring at the surrounding static. My brain was a little distracted. Suddenly, Yi Shuang's voice came from the communication device, low and rapid. "Lin Hao, there is a static movement in the southeast direction, and the radiation wave is abnormal. It is not a monster, but a human." My heart was tightened, and Lima responded in a low voice, "Received, everyone is ready, don't make a sound, let's observe first." The team members quickly woke up and found their own cover. Yi Shuang relied on her perception ability to slowly touch me towards the southeast. With the faint moonlight, I saw about several black shadows moving behind the sand dunes far away, acting sneakily, not like monsters, but more like well-trained plunderers. My heart sank and I said to Yi Shuang in a low voice, "Maybe the subordinates of the Bloodblade King, we have been followed." Yi Shuang was a little bit lighted, her face darkened. "They are not many people, so they probably are a pathfinder. We can't fight head-on, we retreat first and turn them off." I gritted my teeth. Although I was unwilling to give up, I also knew that fighting hard was not an option. So we quietly retreated with the team, wandered around a long circle, avoiding the visual line that helped the plunderers. But this time, I was delayed for a long time and only rushed to the edge of the Dead Valley at noon the next day. The Dead Valley looks like a scar on the wasteland. The ground is radiated and burned black and gray. The air is filled with fog that cannot be dissolved. The alarms for the anti-radiation equipment are rushing around. I looked at the instrument with my head down. The radiation concentration has exceeded the standard by 3 times. If I stayed for a long time, I guess everyone would have to change. Everyone wears a protective mask, move quickly, and you will reach the experiment base after passing through this valley. I softened my head and walked into the valley. Yi Shuang walked in the middle of the team, responsible for the alert, and the others followed closely, and no one dared to say a word. The viewing rate in the valley was so low that I felt that it was not right after I left for a while. In addition to the radiant fishy smell, there was also a strange smell in the air, as if something was watching us in the dark. Yi Shuang suddenly stopped walking, and the sound came from the communication device, carrying a rare tactile. Lin Hao, stop. There is something in front of me, the radiation wave is too strong, and my perception is interfered. As the voice fell, the ground suddenly moved, and then a huge strange monster rushed out of the mist. The guy was 3 meters tall, his body looked like a piece of flesh that was radiated and melted. He was covered in deformed touch, and his mouth was harsh screaming, and he rushed straight towards us. Scatter! Fire pressure! I yelled, lifted up the mechanical crossbow and shot it in a series of shots. The crossbow arrows hit the monster with an arc, and only let it dodge it a little. Yi Shuang's electromagnetic step gun also opened fire, and the blue light teared the fog, but the monster's skin was too thick to penetrate. Lin Tai, this guy is not an ordinary monster, it may be a different radiator core. Lao Zhao slashed at the monster's touch with a knife, and shouted, "We have to find the weak point, otherwise we have to explain this." I gritted my teeth, my brain flew quickly, my eyes swept over the monster's body, and finally noticed a luminous crystal on its chest, like something like the core of energy. Yi Shuang, aim at the crystal on its chest and concentrate its firepower. I roared, adjusting the angle of the crossbow arrow and aiming at the crystal. After a few rounds of shooting, the crystal was finally broken, and the monster let out a slight roar, and his big body fell to the ground, smashing a black-gray. But we didn't have time to catch our breath, and more low growls came from the smoke, as if there were still monsters approaching. "Can't fight, run!" I gritted my teeth and ordered, and led the team to the depths of the valley. The roar behind me is getting closer and closer, and I can see more deformed shadows chasing in the radiant fog. We ran desperately, and the alarm on the anti-radio equipment was almost blown up, but no one dared to stop. Finally, after running for almost half an hour, we broke out of the Dead Valley and came to a relatively flat wasteland. The roar behind him gradually went away, and it was estimated that the monsters were unwilling to leave the area with high radiation concentration. I leaned against a broken stone, gasping for breath, sweating all over my body, and smoke in my protective mask. "Are you still so cool?" I asked, gasped, and swung my head at the team. Yi Shuang drew a little, but her face was difficult to see. She is shiny, but Xiaoli was injured. Her arm was scratched by her touch, and her wound was showing signs of radiation infection. My heart sank and I walked to Xiaoli's body. Sure enough, I saw a deep bone-like wound on his left arm. The skin around me had begun to turn black and emitted a strange smell. He gritted his teeth and smiled reluctantly. "Lin Tai, I'm fine, I can still leave, don't worry about me." "Don't be stupid." I patted his shoulder, took out only a little anti-radiation medicine from my backpack, and injected him with a shot. "No one will drop the teammates, hold on, the experiment base is right in front." Yi Shuang walked to me and said in a low voice, "Lin Hao, radiation infection is not a trivial matter. The drug can only be cured, but there is no way to cure it. We have to find the base quickly, otherwise he won't be able to hold it for long." I clicked the head, and my heart seemed to be filled with a stone. I continued to move forward for a while and finally saw the experiment base marked on the map in the evening. The place looked like a huge metal shell half buried in the sand, with a surface full of corrosive marks. The steel door at the entrance had long been radiated and deformed, and the high-tech shadow of the old civilization could be seen. "That's it," I said softly, and turned around and ordered the team. Yi Shuang took 2 people outside. Lao Zhao and I went in to search. "Move quickly, don't drag it." Yi Frost was on the head and took someone to cover up the warning. We and Lao Zhao carefully diamonded into the base. It was so dark inside that he couldn't see his 5 fingers, so he could only rely on the flashlight to illuminate it. The air was filled with a musty smell and a stinking smell. After a few steps, we discovered several old machines, and there were still some data on the screen, which looked like records of energy research. "Lin, here!" Lao Zhao suddenly shouted. I followed the sound and found that he was standing in a half-collapsed laboratory. In front of him was a huge metal container, and there was an invisible view of a crystal emitting faint blue light. Energy crystal. I was delighted, walked over tightly, and tried to open the container. But at this moment, Yi Shuang's quick voice suddenly came from outside. "Lin Hao, come out soon. The people from the Bloodblade King are coming. There are a lot of people, we are surrounded." My heart sank, unable to think about it. Zhao and Lao Zhao carried the crystals out of the base together. As soon as he got outside, he saw that Yi Shuang was carrying the man and had already had a fire with a helping plunderer. Those guys were wearing ragged battle suits, holding various modified weapons in their hands, a scar on their head, grinning and sneering, and the sound of sand rubbing like sandpaper. "Lin Hao, didn't expect it? Lord Bloodblade King has long been eyeing you and handing over the crystals, otherwise you don't want to live either." "Dream." I gritted my teeth and shouted, put down my crystals, lifted up the mechanical crossbow and opened fire. Yi Shuang was not idle either. The blue light of the electromagnetic step gun tiered the night light and instantly knocked down 2 wizards. But there were too many people on the other side, and we were quickly forced to move. "Lin Hao, take the crystals and I'll cover it up." Yi Shuang shouted, rushed to the front of me, and forced her to use firepower to tear away for us. I gritted my teeth and called Lao Zhao to lift the crystals and retreat to the ground with the injured Shaoli. The sound of the gun and the roar behind her were mixed together, and Yi Shuang's figure was swallowed by the night. My heart seemed to be cut by a knife, but I knew that stopping now would only make her livestock. After retreating for a few kilometers, the gun finally went far away and we found a hidden dune to hide. I gasped heavily and looked down at the crystals in my hand. The blue light reflected on my face, but I was not happy at all. Yi Shuang is still behind, and there are other people in the team, and who doesn't know if they can take it off. "Lin Tai, what should we do?" Lao Zhao asked in a low voice, his voice full of fatigue. "Wait." I gritted my teeth and looked at the dark night away. "Wait until Yi Shuang and the others come back. The crystal is obtained, but people can't lose it." The night became increasingly heavy, and the sound of the wasteland was like a humble word, with an insignificant chill. I held the mechanical crossbow tightly, stared at the direction I came, and silently prayed in my heart that they could come safely. The night on the wasteland was as dark as it could swallow everything, and the sound of the sound scraped the dunes with sand, making people's face hurt. I squatted behind the hidden sand dunes, holding the mechanical crossbow tightly in my hands, staring at the direction I came. Lao Zhao lowered his head and checked the energy crystal that had finally been sucked. The blue light reflected on his scar-filled face, which seemed a little unreal. Shaoli leaned against a piece of stone, his face was as white as paper, and the dark spots in the wound seemed to have expanded a little more. Despite the injection of anti-radiation drugs, his breathing was getting weaker and weaker. "Lin Tai, can Yi Shuang and the others come back?" Lao Zhao asked softly, with a slight uncertainty in his language. The movement in his hand did not stop, as if he wanted to conceal the anxiety in his heart by checking the crystals. "Yes." I gritted my teeth, my voice as if I was listening to it. "Yi Shuang is not the kind of person who falls easily, and no one else will give up. She said that she would tear away for us, and she would definitely do it." But when I said that, my heart felt like I was pressing down on my wall, so I couldn't breathe. The gun had already stopped, and the wasteland far away was silent, and even the monster's roar could not be heard. This kind of tranquility makes people even more uneasy, like the pressure before the storm. I looked down at the communication device on my wrist. There was only a quiet noise on the screen, and there was no response at all. As time passed, the night became more and more dense, and the cold wind made people's bones feel cold. Shaoli suddenly coughed for a few times, and the sound was as sandy as a broken box. I rushed over to hold him tightly and patted him on the back. He raised his head with a slight smile. "Lin, don't worry about me. If this crystal is taken back, the fortress will be saved. My life is worth it. Don't be stupid." I slammed him in a deep voice, took out the last bit of pressure from my backpack, and stuffed it into his hand. "Eat something and keep your energy alive. No one will let down the teammates, remember?" Shaoli clicked a little, and didn't say anything, but just lowered his head and ate the cucumber, his eyes full of fatigue. I turned to look at Lao Zhao, who was rubbing a machete with a piece of rag, muttering in his mouth, "I can't even sleep in this broken place. It's so fucking." I smiled reluctantly, but didn't answer, and my eyes turned to the darkness far away. At this moment, a slight response suddenly came from below the dunes, as if something was approaching. My heart was tightened, and Lima made a hand to silence his voice. Lao Zhao and Shaoli quickly became alert, holding their own weapons and shoving them behind the cover. I carefully poked out and, with the faint moonlight, I saw a few black shadows touching this side. The action is very light, as if he deliberately lowered the sound. He is not a monster, but more like a human. My heart sank and said to Lao Zhao in a low voice, "Maybe it is the subordinate of the Bloodblade King. Be prepared and don't make any sound." Lao Zhao pointed his head a little, held the machete tightly, and his eyes were filled with ruthlessness. I adjusted the angle of the mechanical crossbow, aimed at the black shadow in the front, and prepared to open fire at any time. But the moment I pulled the flip on my finger, one of the black shadows suddenly stopped, raised their hands, and shouted in a low voice, "Lin Hao, it's me. This sound is Yi Shuang." My heart was shocked, and I put down my weapon tightly, stood up and looked at it. Sure enough, under the moonlight, Yi Shuang walked over with the remaining 2 team members. Her body was covered in dust and blood. Her battle suit was broken for a few times, and the gun tube of the electromagnetic invader was still radiating heat, and it seemed that she had just experienced a war. "Sister Xuan." I quickly walked up to me, and the excitement could not be hidden in the voice. "You are fine, it's really great." Yi Xuan glanced at me, her face was still so cold and hard, but there was a flash of fatigue and peace of mind in her eyes. "When I say I will open your way, I won't break my promise. The helper was led by me, and I solved a few, and the rest ran away, so I shouldn't chase after you at some point." I clicked the head and looked at the 2 team members behind her. They were not much better. One of them had rags on their arms and the other face was covered in blood, but at least they were still alive. It's good that people are busy. We have to go back and the fortress is waiting for this crystal. I patted the energy crystal in my backpack, and there was a vibrator in my language. Yi Shuang didn't say anything, just clicked her head, her eyes swept over Shaoli, and her eyebrows rose slightly. "What's wrong with him?" "It's not very good. I have radioactive infections, and the drug can only relieve it." I replied in a low voice, and my heart sank again. I have to go back to the fortress quickly. There may be some Wei Zhangjing. Then don't be in a vein, just leave now. Yi Shuang didn't say anything more, and turned around and asked the team members to pack up their equipment and prepare for the road to the night. I didn't hesitate either, so I helped Shaoli up, carried the crystals with Lao Zhao, and led the team towards the fortress. The road back is more difficult than when you come. The radiation fog on the waste soil seems to be more dense, and the protective mask is full of fog, which is surprisingly low. Yi Shuang's perception ability became less stable due to radiation interference, so we could only move forward by relying on maps and direct vision. On the way, I encountered several strange monsters in the order, but fortunately, the number was not large, so I could only get over it. Shaoli's condition became worse and worse. On the 3rd day, he could no longer walk and his mind became blurred. He could only rely on my back and forth on my back. Yi Shuang walked in front of the team, responsible for opening the road. She looked back at Shaoli from time to time, her eyes filled with worry, but she didn't say anything, she just bit her teeth and continued to move. Lin Hao, there is a ridge in front of the Dead Valley. You can get to the fortress after walking for another day. Yi Shuang said in a low voice, paused her foot and pointed to the black and gray valley far away, but the radiation concentration is still very high, we have to prepare. I clicked a little and knew very well in my heart that I almost had the entire army when I passed through the valley last time. This time I was carrying the injured, and the risk was even greater. But I don't have to choose. It takes 2 more days to walk on the road. Shaoli can't hold on for that long, and the energy core of the fortress can't be weighted. Everyone wears a protective mask, keep in shape, and move quickly. I ordered in a low voice, tighten Shaoli and walk into the valley with my head. The radiator alarm began to rush again, and the fishy smell in the air made people want to vomit, but who did not stop? The valley was still so stressful, the fog was as heavy as if it could swallow people. It occasionally rang lowly from afar, making the human nerves sway like strings. Not long after leaving, Yi Shuang suddenly stopped and warned in a low voice, there is a static, the radiation wave is not right, it may be a monster. As the voice fell, a few strange monsters were indeed pulled out from the fog. The body shape was smaller than the last time, but the number was more, with 7 or 8. The deformed limbs dragged the sand and rushed towards us. I gritted my teeth and shouted, scatter and protect Shaoli and the crystal. Yi Shuang set up an electromagnetic step gun, and the blue light tore the fog and instantly knocked down 2 monsters. Lao Zhao rushed to the front with a machete, and forced a monster to attack, and the rest of them also found their own positions to counterattack. I placed Shaoli behind a stone head, lifted up the mechanical crossbow and joined the battle. The crossbow arrow shot a monster's head with an arc, allowing it to stop. But the number of monsters was actually too large, and we were quickly forced to move. Yi Shuang opened her fire and shouted, Lin Hao, take Shaoli and Jing first, and Lao Zhao and I will break up. No. I gritted my teeth and replied, and then shot an arrow and quickly changed. Last time, I almost couldn't come back. Let's go together this time, who should not be ordered? Yi Shuang no longer argued, but just clicked the head and the firepower became even more intense. At this moment, a monster suddenly broke through the defense line and directly slammed into the cover where Shaoli was. My heart was tight and I couldn't see anything else. I suddenly snatched over and pressed my body in front of Shaoli. The monster's claws grabbed my back hard, and the anti-radiation device was torn apart. The pain came instantly. I gritted my teeth and slapped it hard, raised my hand and shot it through its brain with an arrow. Lin Hao. Yi Shuang's voice was filled with a rare panic. She rushed over to support me and quickly checked my wound. I gasped and slammed my hand, it's okay, I'm injured, keep going. Fortunately, the remaining monsters were solved by Lao Zhao and other team members, so we didn't bother to help each other out of the valley. The wound on my back hurts so much. After the anti-radio equipment broke, the radiation began to penetrate. I could feel my body getting heavier, but I gritted my teeth and didn't say a sound. With the crystal in hand, the hope of the fortress is right in front of me, I can't fall. After passing through the Dead Valley, the journey became relatively flat, and the contour of the far-off iron castle finally appeared in the field. The broken steel outer wall flashed with cold light under the sun, like a tired guard, silently waiting for our coming. Seeing this scene, everyone seemed to be injected with force and their pace was accelerated unconsciously. Lin Hao, the communication device has a signal. Yi Shuang suddenly said, quickly opened the equipment, and tried to contact the fortress. A few seconds later, Zhang Jing's familiar and worthy sound came from the communication device. Hey, who? Lin Hao. Are you still alive? Wind, of course I'm alive. I answered the communication device and replied with a sound, Zhang Jing, prepare for the medical area. We have injured staff, and we have got the energy crystal, ready to receive it. Zhang Jing was silent for a second, and then he was rarely excited, okay, arrange it now. Dongmen is open, you will come back quickly, and the fortress will soon be unable to hold back. After closing the communication, I turned to the team and said, "Did you hear it? Home is right in front, the last journey, I'll get it." Everyone clenched their teeth and used their last force to rush towards the fortress. When the iron door rose in front of us, the familiar steel air came over, the tight string in my heart finally relaxed. The warriors inside the fortress quickly came forward, helped to hold the injured, and took the energy crystals, and the scene was busy. Zhang Jing was pulled out of the control room, his eyes were not even on his face, and he ran over to check the crystal urgently, and muttered in his mouth, "I really took it back. You are so lucky to help you, you are so lucky." I leaned against the wall, panting and grinned, "I'm hard to live, but I almost explained it there. Can the crystal be used?" Zhang Jing lowered his head and pointed out, "It can be used, it has a high purity. It can be installed in the energy core. The fortress can be carried out for at least another half a year. However, the core's decline and reduction problem has not been solved thoroughly. This is just a cure but not a root cause." "Half a year has passed," I said softly, and my eyes turned to the wasteland far away. "At least we still have hope." Shaoli was sent to a medical area. Although the radiation infection was severe, Zhang Jing said there was still help. As long as the old equipment is activated with the energy of the crystal, higher-level anti-radiation drugs can be synthesized. The wound on my back was also treated simply. Although it hurt so much, it was not infected at least. As night falls, the atmosphere inside the fortress is a little lighter than before. The arrival of energy crystals has given everyone hope, at least not worry about the prevention systems stopping in a short period of time. I stood on the watchtower, blowing the cold wind, watching the last light on the faraway wasteland. My brain couldn't calm down. Yi Shuang walked to me, leaning against the iron column, and her voice was low. "What are you thinking? The mission has been completed, why do you still have a lot of worries?" I smiled bitterly and slammed my head. "The crystal has been taken back, but this is just the beginning." Zhang Jing said correctly, "The problem of core deterioration has not been resolved, and the source of the radiation storm is still outside, so we have long faced greater trouble." Yi Shuang was silent for a few seconds, and her eyes turned to the distance, then faced the Lord. "Lin Hao, this broken place in the end of the world is a day of life. If you can hold the fortress for more than one day, you will be rewarded. Don't force yourself too tightly." I didn't answer, but just lowered my head and took out the shiny iron piece from my pocket and rubbed it lightly. This is the first part of the machinery and my thoughts about the past. My father and sister's faces appeared in my brain again, and the guilt still swayed me like a knife, but this time, there was a light of hope. "Sister Shuang, if we can really find the source of the radiation storm, do you think we can change everything?" I asked in a low voice, with a slight uncertainty in my language. Yi Shuang turned her head and looked at me with a gentle look on her face. "I don't know. But as long as there is hope, it's worth trying. Lin Hao, the fortress belongs to everyone, you are not alone." I clicked a little, and it seemed like I had removed a little weight from my heart. The wasteland far away is still deserted, with radiant fog covering the horizon, but the lights of the fortress are lit up in the night, like a weak and strong fire, guarding the last home of mankind. "Let's go down and rest." Yi Shuang patted my shoulder and turned around and walked down the tower. I finally took a look at Woody, stuffed the iron piece back into my pocket, and followed her down the watchtower. The night wind is still biting, but I feel a little more confident in my heart. The road ahead is still long and there are still many challenges, but as long as the fortress is still there and as long as there is hope, we have to continue.